Their bath towel was still damp when the cruise ship Ocean Reverie departed from Long Beach on July 14, 2011. The UCLA doctor couple, Isaac and Lillian Bennett, were last seen clinking wine glasses on the deck, the golden sunset casting a glow on the neatly folded white lab coat placed on the table beside them. 3 days later, cabin 723 remained locked from the inside, but they had vanished without a trace. No one saw them leave the ship. No one heard any unusual noises. And what was found 8 years later, adrift at sea, would make people question the nature of mirrors, sounds, and the very reality we live in. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest stories. July 14, 2011, 4:42 p.m., Long Beach Harbor, California. The vibrant summer sunlight poured over the bustling port as Ocean Reverie, a mid-sized luxury cruise ship with a capacity of over 1,800 passengers, prepared to depart for a 5-day journey through the Baja waters, with its final destination in Ensenada, Mexico. This was the ship's last voyage before entering a month-long scheduled maintenance period. On shore, the ship's horn echoed through the air, mingling with festive music and the sound of loudspeakers calling out the names of the final boarding passengers. Crew members in crisp white uniforms bowed to welcome guests. Luggage was wheeled onto the deck, while couples hand in hand, young families, and elderly tourists crowded the railings, snapping selfies against the deep blue sky. Among those boarding via the main gangway that day were Dr. Isaac Bennett, 42, an anesthesiologist at UCLA's Ronald Reagan Medical Center, and his wife Dr. Lillian Bennett, 39, a pediatric oncologist and part-time lecturer at UCLA's School of Medicine. The two were known in Southern California's medical community as an exemplary couple, intelligent, dedicated, and rarely apart from their work. Close acquaintances describe them as workaholics, with schedules packed with shifts, research, and conferences. Their last-minute decision to book a cruise surprised many, including Lillian's cousin, Erica, who drove them to the port. As they hugged goodbye, Erica teased, "Please don't bring any medical books on board." Isaac laughed. "This time, we're completely disappearing from the world." Lillian lightly touched her cousin's shoulder, flashing a bright smile. "If anything happens, just blame the garlic butter shrimp." The couple boarded the ship, hand in hand. No one could have known it was the last time they'd be seen. 3 days later, in the early morning of July 17th, the ship docked temporarily in Ensenada, Mexico. Some passengers disembarked for city tours. During a routine head count, there was no response from cabin 723 on the 7th deck. Housekeeping reported that the room hadn't been accessed that morning. The bed remained neatly made from the previous day. Luggage was untouched in the closet, and personal toiletries were still in the bathroom. There were no signs of a struggle. Nothing was disturbed. No valuables were missing. The lights were off. No note was left behind. The door was locked from the inside. The keycard system recorded the last use of the cabin's card at 6:57 p.m. on July 16th. After that, there were no further entries or exits. The couple didn't appear at the buffet dinner, weren't present at the jazz concert on the deck, and no one recalled seeing them since the previous afternoon. A room service attendant reported seeing them reading on their balcony at noon that day, and that was the last confirmed sighting of them alive. By noon on July 17th, the captain officially initiated the missing passenger protocol. 2 hours later, the entire voyage was delayed. All 12 decks were searched from bow to stern. The ship's intercom system repeatedly broadcast their names in 3 languages, but all efforts led back to one place: cabin 723, locked, silent, invisible. Isaac and Lillian Bennett had vanished from the ship mid-voyage, leaving no trace, and no one understood what had happened. Just hours after Ocean Reverie's internal search team concluded an ineffective sweep of the 12 decks, the captain sent an urgent alert to the U.S. Coast Guard. The following day, when the ship returned to Long Beach, a multi-agency investigation team was formed, comprising the FBI, the Coast Guard's Special Investigations Unit, the Los Angeles Port Police, and a group of legal advisors on international passengers. Cabin 723 was sealed off, and all remaining passengers were detained for preliminary questioning. The initial questions were practical. If 2 people went missing mid-voyage, how did they leave the ship? Did they jump overboard? Did they access a lifeboat? Did someone open the cabin door for them? But no answers made sense. The hallway camera on Deck 7, which operated 24/7s, had malfunctioned precisely between 1:58 and 4:17 a.m. on July 17th. Technicians confirmed that the footage from that time frame was completely distorted, with flickering signals and garbled background noise nearly impossible to recover. Every emergency exit, deck access door, and technical deck pathway showed no signs of use. Keycard data analysis revealed that the last scan for cabin 723 was at 6:57 p.m. on July 16th. After that, there was no activity from inside or outside the cabin. No one exited, no one entered. All access control systems confirmed the cabin was completely isolated after that time. During interviews with passengers and crew, one recurring detail caught the investigators' attention. Several people recalled an older man with silver hair, wearing a light blue shirt, who often sat near the Bennett's table during group dinners. He never ordered anything elaborate, spoke little, and had a habit of staring at them. A server from the B-deck dining area, where the couple frequently ate, confirmed his presence for at least 3 consecutive nights. The problem was, he wasn't on the passenger list. The FBI cross-referenced the entire passenger manifest, boarding passes, check-in data, and ID photos. None matched the name Jonas Vale, or anyone fitting the description of the man in the blue shirt. Yet he appeared clearly in photos. A photo taken on the evening of July 15th in the ship's reception hall showed Isaac and Lillian standing together, smiling, holding wine glasses, with the silver-haired man standing quietly but distinctly behind them, his eyes fixed on the camera. Nothing seemed odd until a forensic analyst examined the photo's metadata and found something strange. The portion of the image containing him had higher noise levels than the rest, as if it had been superimposed, but it wasn't. In another photo, he was captured walking past the bar. His reflection appeared in a mirror. But in a third photo, taken in the 6th-deck lounge, he had no reflection. Standing in front of a mirror, among 4 other people, he was the only one not reflected. When investigators questioned the ship's security team and captain about the possibility of a stowaway, they shook their heads. Ocean Reverie was among the first ships to implement a QR-coded boarding system linked directly to U.S. Customs Service. Every passenger had to scan their face and present ID before boarding. All cabins had unique electronic locks. There was no way an unauthorized person could board undetected. Yet Jonas Vale, the name recalled by one passenger when questioned, appeared clearly, multiple times, and seemed tied to the Bennetts from the earliest days of the trip. Police scoured national and international databases to trace his identity. No matches were found. There were no ransom calls, no claims of responsibility, no demands. This wasn't a typical kidnapping. It didn't resemble any disappearance the FBI had ever handled. After nearly 9 months of investigation, hundreds of pages of reports, 3 interagency meetings, and 2 expanded witness interviews, Case USCG 2011 Case 422 was marked inconclusive. No evidence of a crime, no signs of intrusion, no way to reconstruct what happened. All answers led to a blank space, and in that blank space, the name Jonas Vale sank to the bottom like a blurred memory, never existing, yet never fully gone. May 14, 2019. Nearly 8 years after the unresolved disappearance of doctors Isaac and Lillian Bennett, the fishing vessel Marietta Dawn was returning to Astoria, Oregon, after 4 days adrift in rough seas, when a crew member spotted an odd object floating among patches of seaweed about 200 yards from the bow. At first, they thought it was a life preserver or abandoned fishing gear, but when retrieved, it was heavier than expected. A dark gray medical bag, old-fashioned, encrusted with seaweed and hardened salt around the zipper. The captain of Marietta Dawn, Jorge Allen, decided not to open the bag immediately. It was sealed and handed over to Coast Guard Sector 13 when the ship docked the next morning. Initially, they didn't think it was related to any case, until an examiner opened it and found a partially rusted surgical kit inside, including 2 medical clamps, laser engraved with Dr. L. Bennett, a personalized marking common in operating rooms. There was also a faded ID card, its laminate peeling but still legible. Lillian Bennett, Maryland. Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. Within 48 hours, the information reached the FBI. Case USCG 2011 Case 422, dormant in archives for nearly 7 years, was abruptly reopened. At the same time, an email arrived in the inbox of investigator Gabriella Huang, a former federal advisor on the 2011 Bennett case. Months earlier, she had transitioned to overseeing a cybercrime task force in Boston, but the name Lillian Bennett instantly pulled her back to a case where every detail ended in silence. No evidence, no explanation, no resolution. Gabriella flew to Portland on May 19. At the FBI's regional evidence locker, she personally inspected the medical bag, the first tangible link to two people who had vanished from the world without a trace. The bag was worn leather, classic in style, lined with silver-gray velvet, with two main compartments and a frayed waterproof lining. The surgical kit included a wooden-handled scalpel, a dissection clamp, two medical scissors, and a brass otoscope. All were manufactured between 2000 and 2008, the kind doctors might carry for charity clinics. One clamp, under UV light, revealed a hardened blood stain too degraded for DNA analysis. But it wasn't that which stopped Gabriella. It was a smaller detail in a side pocket beneath the waterproof lining. She found a small rectangular plastic card, like an SD memory card, carefully wrapped in a medical condom tied with 3 knots. When decoded, the card contained no video or photos, just one file. 723_awake.mp3, 16 MB. A male voice recording in a confined space, with a persistent low hum in the background. The voice, hoarse and seemingly exhausted, identified itself as Isaac. If someone hears this, it means the bag reached where it needed to go. Lillian is gone, at least not as she was. We thought we were just taking a vacation, but that person Vale, he's not a waiter, not a passenger. He kept appearing, everywhere, in mirrors, on walls, in sounds no one else could hear. Gabriella listened to the recording nearly 10 times. The background noise was almost like electromagnetic waves. Isaac's voice was intermittently distorted, with loops and gaps. At the 243rd second, there were 3 faint metallic knocks, small but evenly spaced, like a signal. Then the final sentence. If this is found, it means he let it drift, and it means I still have time. When the recording ended, Gabriella's ears still buzzed with a droning rhythmic background sound, cold and lingering. She set down her headphones, looked at the old medical bag in the evidence tray, an object that seemed inanimate, yet it felt as if it had been sent. Not dropped, not lost, but deliberately delivered. That night, in a hotel near the airport, Gabriella opened her laptop and pulled up the old case file. The screen displayed, USCG 2011 Case 422, closed at Unsolved. She clicked to reopen the 2011 case. In the investigation's appendix, there were over 200 photos taken by passengers, collected during the initial expanded investigation. She began reviewing them. Buffet dinners, theme dinners, afternoon teas, deck yoga classes, violin performances in the 6-deck lounge. In over a dozen photos, Gabriella noticed a face appearing with unusual frequency, a silver-haired man, high forehead, expressionless. Always nearby, always in the background, always just far enough from the Bennetts to avoid attention. She extracted those photos into a separate folder, labeled Man in Blue Shirt. The first photo was from the welcome party on the evening of July 14th. Isaac and Lillian stood at the bar, smiling with another middle-aged couple. In the background, only the shoulder and neck of the man in the blue shirt were visible, his face turned away. The second photo, July 15, taken at the 8th deck pool area. Lillian was reading. 3 chairs away, he sat with arms crossed, staring at the sea, eyes closed as if asleep. The third photo, taken in the main dining room on the evening of July 16th, sent a chill down Gabriella's spine. In it, Isaac and Lillian sat across from each other, 2 glasses of red wine on the table. Behind them was a long mirror, reflecting the dining room. Vale sat nearby, not facing the camera, but his reflection in the mirror showed him staring directly at the couple. His eyes were wide, his face unchanged, and strangest of all, the light on his reflection was greenish-gray, distinct from the warm yellow glow of the room. Gabriella zoomed in on the mirror. Under a noise filter, the mirror's pixels rippled slightly, like a water effect distorted by high-frequency interference. It wasn't a typical photo glitch. She sent the image to the FBI's image analysis unit, and 2 days later received a response. Light scattering and wave-like distortion may be linked to localized acoustic or electromagnetic interference. No signs of photo manipulation. In other words, The photo was real, the reflection was real. But it defied the laws of physics. Gabriella searched the 2011 passenger records. She entered every possible variation of Jonas Vale into the federal database. The result? No one by that name was registered on Ocean Revery's July 14, 2011 voyage. She cross-checked boarding passes, passport data, dining records, room keys, credit transactions. Nothing indicated the man in the blue shirt existed. No boarding pass, no cabin number, no transactions, no credit history, no record as a legitimate passenger. Theoretically, he wasn't there. Yet Gabriella had 14 photos documenting his presence at various locations and times, from the banquet hall, deck, hallways, to the elevator. One of the final photos, taken on the afternoon of July 16 by an amateur photographer passenger, made Gabriella catch her breath. The image showed the 7th deck hallway from a distance, cabin 723, clearly visible at the end. The door was closed. No one was around. But, when zoomed in on the bottom right corner below a wall painting, faint, small, almost unnoticeable, was a wall-mounted mirror. And in it, he stood facing the cabin, head slightly tilted, hands clasped behind his back. No one was in the hallway in the original image. Yet he was in the mirror. Gabriella printed the photo and stared at it for 2 hours. Each time she looked longer, a cold sensation crept down her spine. She knew she was no longer just investigating a disappearance. She was pursuing a presence, someone or something, that had no name but was always there, like a shadow in the periphery of the human world. At midnight, she renamed the photo folder, Vale, all caps, not because he was a person, but because, if something stood between the Bennetts and the rest of the world, it was him, a nameless face, an untraceable presence, and perhaps, he was still out there in mirrors, in photos, in the metallic knocks at the bottom of sound. Gabriella Huang drove along the San Diego port on a Friday morning, the sky overcast, sunlight trapped behind a thin veil of salty mist. At the end of Pier 38, Ocean Reverie sat, still and silent, no longer the grand cruise ship of its heyday, but now repurposed as a floating conference center leased by an audio technology company. Its hull was faded, the gold-plated logo scratched, and the crowds were now engineers, researchers, and occasional documentary film crews. Gabriella had arranged access and was granted 2 hours on board. She carried a copy of the Bennett case file, printed photos featuring Vale, and a small recorder in her jacket pocket. She was met by Ruben Patel, the chief engineer overseeing maintenance and internal electrical systems since the ship's repurposing in 2017. "I've heard about the disappearance," Ruben said, leading her through the 5th deck hallway. "But no one in my team talks about it. They just know, Deck 7 has a room where no one can sleep." Gabriella stayed silent. The 7th deck hallway hadn't changed much in nearly a decade. The same wine-colored velvet carpet, frosted white teardrop ceiling lights, and gold-embossed cabin numbers. At cabin 723, Ruben stopped. "We don't rent this room," he said, holding an electronic key. "No one stays longer than 3 hours. One person had a nosebleed, another heard knocking in the walls. Nothing's been proven, but something's off." Gabriella nodded, took the key. The door opened with a dry creak. The room was empty, all original furnishings removed in 2012. Only a gray wooden floor, freshly painted walls, and a small window facing the western sea remained. No bed, no table, no mirror. Nothing to suggest this was where a couple had vanished without a trace. She stepped inside, cautious, as if entering an old skin of the world. A faint smell of salt and decayed wood lingered. Gabriella traced her hand along the walls, feeling the seams where the wood met the floor and ceiling. Then, beneath the left wall's corner, where the wood paneling parted just enough for a finger to slip through, she saw a small, curled, discolored photo, as if pressed between wood and moisture for years. She crouched, using tweezers to extract it. It was an instant camera print, its edges crumbling. In it, Lillian stood alone before a mirror, her eyes locked on the lens, her face eerily still. But in the reflection behind her, Isaac stood too, not beside her, but close behind, so close their shadows nearly merged. And between them, a hazy, shapeless darkness, like smoke, as if the camera had blurred at one precise spot, right where the two people seemed to touch. Gabriella sat on the floor. Her heartbeat slowed, not from fear, but from an odd sensation creeping into her chest. This image wasn't just a moment captured, It was like a slice of another reality, where something not of this world had slipped between two people who were once one. Reuben called from the door. "You okay?" Gabriella stood, slipping the photo into her pocket. "Just a few more minutes, all right. But if you hear anything odd in the walls," he hesitated. "Just know the audio engineers said there's weird resonance here. We tried soundproofing, replaced ceiling panels, but something's still there. You know that feeling when a room hums faintly, even if you don't hear it? Like the air's being compressed from inside the walls." Gabriella said nothing. She turned back, placed the small recorder on the floor, and pressed record. For 3 minutes, she said nothing. Just listened. At 2:14, 3 faint, evenly spaced knocks sounded from the wall where the bed once stood. Not loud, not sudden, just present. She stopped the recorder, picked it up, stood. As she turned, the small window behind her reflected her shadow on the wooden floor, and for a fleeting moment, it reflected another figure beside her, before Gabriella turned and saw the room empty again. She stepped out, softly closing the door. "No one can sleep here," Reuben repeated, as if reminding himself. "Not because of ghosts, because of the sound. It doesn't belong to this world." Gabriella didn't respond. In her hand, the old photo of Lillian, and the darkness between her and Isaac, felt heavier, deeper, as if the thing between them was starting to move. 3 days after leaving Ocean Reverie, Gabriella Huang couldn't shake the image from the photo wedged in the wall, Lillian, before the mirror, Isaac behind, and between them a dark smear, like ash, settled on a negative. Each night, she replayed the 3 knocks recorded in cabin 723. The sound wasn't loud. Not clear, but something about its rhythm chilled her, steady, deliberate, like a call, not urgent, not threatening, but patient. On Monday evening, Gabriella opened her laptop and accessed the public oceanographic database to review data from the time of the Bennett's disappearance. Then she stumbled upon something unusual on the night of July 18, 2011. The same night Isaac and Lillian were confirmed to have vanished. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had recorded a low-frequency acoustic signal from the southern Pacific Ocean between the coordinates of Mexico and Hawaii. The signal had never been publicly disclosed. Stranger still, all related audio data, which should have been accessible under the FOIA, was marked redacted. Internal research only. Gabriella emailed an old contact. Dr. Ciro Duval, a marine acoustics researcher who had worked for a NOAA branch specializing in ultra-low frequency waves from the ocean floor. They had collaborated on a 2015 plane crash case off the coast. She didn't expect a quick response, but less than 12 hours later, Duval called back. His voice was hoarse and somewhat cautious. "You're asking about the Echo V-118 signal, aren't you?" Gabriella paused. "I didn't know it had a code name. I only knew it was recorded on the night of July 18th. Echo V-118 is what we called it internally. Picked up by 2 hydrophone stations at the Clarion-Clipperton Fracture Zone and Johnston Atoll. The signal lasted 43 seconds, extremely low frequency, below the human hearing threshold. But the sound pattern was highly unusual. Unusual how? Duval was silent for a few seconds before answering. It had structure, like a phonetic sequence. An ordered pattern, it repeated, but not exactly. As if it was tuning itself. Like what? Gabriella asked. Not whale sounds. Not seismic activity. Not like the bloop or Julia. I used to call it mirror tongue because it sounded like a whisper from itself. Gabriella shivered. And you'll never find it in the public system, he continued. That data was classified in 2013. The internal explanation was interference. But I know better, it wasn't interference. That sound, it wasn't calling for help, it was searching, like a directional signal. But not to locate a ship, to call someone to it. Gabriella hung up. In her mind, the recording from the SD card in the medical bag echoed again. Vale, he's not a passenger. He kept appearing, in mirrors, in sounds no one else could hear. She printed out the map of the Echo V-118 signal. Its origin was pinpointed in the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, a blank space with no maritime signals, no commercial shipping routes. Near the Clarion-Clipperton Fracture Zone. Near where NOAA had once theorized the presence of superconducting minerals deep under the seabed, where sound waves could reflect and travel like natural tunnels. That night, Gabriella couldn't sleep. She lay in her hotel bed, room lights off, only the dim glow of streetlights filtering through the curtains. When the clock ticked to 2:16 a.m., she jolted awake to a sound, 3 knocks coming from the bathroom mirror. She approached slowly, flipping on the light. No one was there, but the mirror was slightly fogged, as if someone had breathed on it. And in the thin mist, Gabriella noticed an indentation of 3 fingertips, as if someone had knocked from the inside. The next morning, she submitted an internal access request to Noah's system using her federal clearance. While waiting, she decided to meet Dr. Ciro Duval in person at his research office at UC Santa Cruz. Duval, now in his 60s, lived in a cluttered office filled with documents and sonar models. He pulled Gabriella to a corner where a black and white printout of sound waves stretched across a table. "This is Echo V118, he pointed to the extended wave pattern. "See, it has a pulse, pause, pulse, pulse structure, then repeats. But each repetition, the pause shortens." Gabriella looked closer. "Like it's learning." "Exactly," Duval nodded. "And this," he pulled out another sheet, "is the background sound from the recording you sent me. The 723_awake file. I filtered the frequency and cross-referenced it with NOAA data. The result, an 86% match." Gabriella froze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the background waves in Isaac Bennett's recording aren't wind, not mic static. It's Echo V118, meaning that recording was made within the direct influence of that sound, or at its very source." Gabriella's throat went dry. "And one last thing," Duval said, lowering his voice. "Do you know why that sound was classified by NOAA? Because it's unexplainable?" "No," he looked at her, his eyes serious. "Because in a 2014 underwater wave response simulation, the Guam hydrophone station sent a test signal based on Echo V118 structure. 2 days later, a response signal, same frequency, same pattern, was recorded, but reversed." "Reversed? Like in a mirror?" Gabriella stood still, and for the first time in 8 years of working the Bennett case, she wasn't sure she was investigating a disappearance anymore. It was a summons, a recording not stored on a drive, but at the ocean's depths, a signal sent not to be rescued, but to open something, and perhaps someone or something had heard it. Gabriella Huang never believed in unexplained coincidences, and when the Echo V118 sound waves matched the background in Isaac Bennett's recording, she was even more convinced that what happened in 2011 didn't fall within the realm of ordinary physics. But whether that signal came from the ocean floor or another layer of reality, one thing she hadn't forgotten on the Ocean Reverie that year. It wasn't just Isaac and Lillian. There were over 1,800 other passengers, and among them, at least one was still alive and carried a memory no one wanted to revisit. Her name was Mildred Kane, 74 years old, residing at Rosehaven Nursing Home, south of Santa Barbara. In the 2011 passenger manifest, she was listed as part of a luxury retirement tour. After the ship returned to port, Kane didn't fill out any witness statements, didn't respond to interviews, and a week after disembarking, she was hospitalized in a state of mild panic with signs of disorientation. Official diagnosis: acute cognitive disorder following neurological trauma. It took Gabriella a week to secure permission and arrange a private meeting at the nursing home. Kane now lived in a small wooden-paneled room, its window opening to a wildflower garden. On her table were old photo frames, cookbooks, and an unfinished painting, its lines shaky but deliberate. When Gabriella introduced herself, Kane merely nodded. No surprise, no unease. As if she'd been expecting someone to come asking. "I'm looking into the disappearance on the Ocean Reverie," Gabriella said slowly, placing a few photos on the table. "Do you remember this couple?" Kane slowly picked up the photo. Isaac and Lillian stood by the 9th deck railing, the afternoon light gilding their hair. She said nothing, but her hand tightened slightly on the photo. "And this person?" Gabriella slid another photo forward. It was Jonas Vale, captured from a candid wedding video on the ship, blurry, but clear enough to make out his silver hair and expressionless eyes. Mildred Kane stared at the photo for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice trembling but clear. "He never came through a door. He appeared from the mirror." Gabriella stayed silent. Kane closed her eyes, her lips pressed tight, as if she'd just let slip something she shouldn't have. After a few seconds of silence, she turned, pulled a small notebook from a drawer, opened it to the last page, and took out a purple ballpoint pen. Her right hand rested on her lap. Her left hand held the pen. Gabriella noted this. According to Kane's medical records, she was right-handed. She began writing, slowly but steadily. There are people who don't come by ship. Gabriella read the words, each one cutting into her own memories. Vale's name, the mirror without a reflection. The sound from the depths, the 3 knocks, and now a statement from a survivor. There are people who don't come by ship. Can you tell me more? Gabriella asked, her voice soft, as if afraid to shatter the fragile silence. Well, what did you see? Mildred Kane looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, those eyes held something, not fear, but foreknowledge. Not everyone is chosen, she said slowly. They only take those whose mirror doesn't return their image. The mirror doesn't. Some people look in a mirror and don't see themselves, or they see themselves, but standing somewhere else. Gabriella's spine chilled. What Kane was saying didn't align with any logic, but it aligned perfectly with every clue she was following, from the distorted mirror photos, to Vale appearing only in reflections, to Echo V118, a reversed echo, as if from the other side of a plane. He was there the whole trip, Kane continued. I saw him reflected in the restroom mirror near the dining room, but no one was standing in front of it. I thought it was my shadow, until I stepped away, and he was still there, in the mirror, but I wasn't anymore. Gabriella couldn't speak. Her chest felt heavy, as if weighed down by a layer of water. The last night, Kane said, her voice softening, as if slipping back into memory. I saw him standing outside cabin 723, not moving, not speaking, just standing there, as if waiting. And then I don't remember anything else. The next morning, I woke up in my cabin. The door was still locked. But in the mirror, there was a long smudge, like someone had dragged their hand from the inside. Gabriella placed her hand on Kane's notebook. You wrote that with your left hand. Why? Kane looked at her, then gave a sad smile, like a small crack in an old wall. I don't trust my right hand is mine anymore. Gabriella left the nursing home as a light rain began to fall. The raindrops traced slanted lines across her car's windshield, blurred and trembling, like how she felt, uncertain of what was real. But in her hand was a written note, a testimony and a living witness. Mildred Kane had seen Vale, and she still carried the traces of what he left behind. Though only the mirror had ever witnessed it, and perhaps mirrors never reflected the truth. They only echoed something drawing closer. Back from the nursing home, Gabriella didn't sleep. Mildred Kane's words swirled in her mind like an echo in a tunnel. There are people who don't come by ship. The mirror doesn't reflect that person. My right hand isn't mine anymore. She reopened every file, reorganized the entire timeline, noted every detail. Echo V118, Jonas Vale, cabin 723, the 3 knocks, the drifting evidence, Isaac's recording, and especially Lillian Bennett's role. A detail suddenly emerged from an old file she hadn't noticed before. Lillian had been a guest speaker at a symposium on non-pharmacological PTSD treatment. The symposium's title, Neuroacoustic Applications in Trauma Recovery. The organizer, Diogenes Foundation. The name Diogenes immediately caught Gabriella's attention. In philosophy, Diogenes was the man who claimed humans should live only with raw truth. But in federal medical and research records, Diogenes had appeared in a restricted 2009 report linked to experiments on cognitive restructuring under acoustic isolation conditions. She began tracing the lead. After 3 days of submitting multiple data access requests, Gabriella received a single response from an untraceable email address, projectdiogenes.archive@disused.net. It contained one line: if you're investigating what happened in cabin 723, someone is watching. No greeting, no signature, but attached was a single PDF, a blurry scan of a 2008 symposium flyer, held on, The Ocean Reverie. Lillian Bennett was one of 5 speakers. Her talk's title, Mirrors and Cognitive Distorting Waveforms in Recall Therapy. Gabriella froze. The Ocean Reverie wasn't just a vacation spot. It had been a testing ground for an acoustic treatment method, where cabins might have been designed to generate low-frequency sound reflections to reconstruct memories and brain patterns. That evening, she received a call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was a man's, low, trembling, but clear. I used to be an audio technician for Diogenes. I have things you should see. The meeting was arranged at an old Navy storage facility outside San Pedro. Gabrielle arrived early in the morning, the sky overcast, salty sea wind cutting through the rusted chain-link fence. The man waiting at the side gate was Raymond Tash, who had overseen resonance metrics at test sites, including the Ocean Reverie. Raymond led her to a basement where dusty file crates sat under dim fluorescent lights. After minutes of searching, he pulled out an architectural blueprint, the original schematics of the Ocean Reverie before its 2012 refit. On it, Gabriella saw the 7th deck cabin layout. And among the sequentially numbered rooms, cabin 723 was circled, not in pen, but with an embossed symbol. A black circle surrounding the Greek letter theta, the mathematical symbol for a threshold or a point of change in consciousness. This was a resonance test site, Raymond said quietly. One of 3 special cabins. They installed ultra-low frequency emitters behind the walls. The theory was to create a mirror room, where memories were slightly disrupted to rebuild cognitive patterns. Why dir the why? Sekdad in partage. This was Unsolved, Gabriella asked. Did they test on people? Only volunteers, he replied. Some veterans, a few PTSD patients. They called it deep sea therapy. But not everyone was chosen. Some were more sensitive to the feedback waves. Some reflections didn't follow the rules, as if the mirror in their mind opened another path. Gabriella trembled slightly. Did anyone not come back? Raymond looked at her for a long time, then nodded. 2 people. One vanished before the ship docked. Another locked themselves in their room after seeing the unreflected person step through the mirror. Gabriella looked at the blueprint again. Cabin 723 was no longer just a room of disappearance, it was a trigger point. That evening, back at her hotel, she opened her email and found a new anonymous message. No subject, no return address. Just a brief paragraph, typed hurriedly. Veil doesn't come from anywhere. He only reflects what humans fear most. No explanation, no evidence. But in Gabriella's mind, another piece clicked into place. Jonas Veil wasn't a person, not an independent entity. He was a feedback loop, a manifestation of a signal, a sound, not born from a mouth, but from a consciousness out of phase. Veil didn't come by ship, didn't pass through doors, didn't exist on lists, because he didn't need to arrive. All it took was fear enough to make someone look in a mirror and doubt who was there. And 723? It wasn't a room, it was a living mirror, a threshold between this world and something outside, or inside, on Diogenes. They didn't create Veil, they only created the conditions for him to be seen. And once seen, you couldn't stop hearing, couldn't stop remembering, couldn't stop carrying him into dreams, into knocks, into the image of yourself standing behind yourself in the mirror. Gabriella turned off the room's lights, looking at the small bathroom mirror, and for a split second, before she looked away, she saw her shoulder, but slightly off, as if someone wearing her jacket stood behind her, not quite aligned. That morning, Gabriella Huang received an urgent email from the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit 3 in Quantico. The subject line was simple. SD-723 recovered. Full extraction complete. She opened the attached file. It was a technical report with a secure link to a WAV audio file, 17 minutes and 8 seconds long. The file was recovered from a 2 GB micro SD card, hidden deep in the lining of Lillian Bennett's medical bag, discovered during a re-examination of the bag under low-energy X-ray. This card was entirely separate from the SD card that held 723_awake, MP3. This was a second card, hidden more carefully, unformatted, containing only one audio file, D_threshold_log.wave. No metadata, no timestamp, just Isaac Bennett's voice, starting slow, whispering, then growing urgent, as the reality around him seemed to fracture. Gabriella put on her headphones. The room was silent. She pressed play. If someone's hearing this, it means I couldn't make it back. I'm Isaac Bennett. I think we crossed a threshold we didn't understand. We weren't prepared at all. His voice blended with an unclear background noise, not like waves, not like machinery, but like a wave vibrating in the mind. It started with dreams, but not nightmares. A kind of repeating space. A long dining table. No waiters, no voices, but every time we went there the food was ready. Always hot, never ran out. Isaac paused for a few seconds, then continued, his voice starting to tremble. Lillian had the same dreams. We checked our sleep logs. REM cycles matched perfectly. She started hearing sounds before I did. A sound, like waves, but rhythmic. Like an uneven heartbeat coming from underwater. She said, "They're calling me." Gabriella gripped the headphones. In the recording's background, she could almost hear the pulsing rhythm Isaac described, 3 intermittent beats, then repeating. Like echo Vev, 118. But fainter, like an echo from within the mind. Isaac went on, I started having moments of disorientation. Spaces shifted in a blink. I'd walk out of the bathroom and find myself at the deck door, not remembering how far I'd gone. I'd touch my hand, and it felt like wearing someone else's brain as a glove. His voice choked, then sped up suddenly. I believe cabin 723 wasn't random. It responds. It echoes what the person inside is thinking, fearing, trying to forget. But it doesn't recreate. It distorts. Lillian saw her mother in the mirror, but she died in 2006. I saw myself, but wearing my father's jacket. Gabriella's heart skipped a beat. Isaac was breathing heavily. There are moments I think I'm not myself anymore. Consciousness splits into 2 branches. One keeps talking, the other just watches. Lillian started calling me by the wrong name. She said, "Vale is wearing your mirror like skin." A long silence followed. I don't know what Jonas Vale is, but I think he has no body, no destination. He only appears when someone looks into a reflection long enough to doubt they're real. The background noise grew heavier, a low distortion that made the sound in Gabriella's headphones feel off-kilter. She felt a slight nausea, but kept listening. They said cabin 723 was a test site. Diogenes called it psychological restructuring, but I don't think psychology can create a sound the universe can't even locate. They opened the mirror, and Vale stepped through. His voice broke at the end. I tried to hold Lillian back, but she started changing. She said, "If I come back, I'll bring him with me." And then, she stopped looking at me. She looked behind me, where I thought there was nothing. Gabriella held her breath. Isaac's voice faded, as if dissolving into the waves. "If I don't make it back, Vale will knock, knock, knock." 3 knocks, clearly audible through the microphone. Right after, the file ended. No fade out, no static, just done. Gabriella sat motionless in front of the screen. She replayed the ending. 3 knocks, identical to what she recorded in cabin 723. Like echo V, 118. Like the sound Mildred Kane heard. She converted the file to a spectrogram, examining the frequency range. And something inexplicable appeared. The 3 knocks were outside the physical range of a handheld microphone, meaning they couldn't have been recorded by this device unless they came from inside it. She reopened the anonymous message from the day before. Vale doesn't come from anywhere. He only reflects what humans fear most. And she suddenly understood. Vale didn't need to appear to invade. Didn't need to arrive to exist. All it took was a sound, repeating, recognizable. All it took was fear, enough to make someone look in a mirror and doubt who was there. All it took was a consciousness fractured just enough to create a crack. Gabriella looked up at the small mirror by her desk. It reflected her, yes, but for a fleeting moment, she felt her left shoulder was slightly off. She turned around. No one was there, but the mirror remained. And the 3-beat sound kept repeating, softly, steadily, as if coming from deep within her ears, or from deep within a memory she wasn't sure was hers anymore. 2 weeks after the D_threshold_log.wav file was recovered and analyzed, Gabriella Huang received an urgent call from the Pacific Region Coast Guard. The voice on the phone trembled slightly. "We found a drifting ship, no identification signal, no registration code, no AIS navigation system. Just a marking painted on the port side, B723. Gabriella's throat went dry. The ship was spotted at 5:38 a.m., drifting 18 nautical miles south of Santa Catalina Island. Initially thought to be an abandoned private cruiser, when the Coast Guard's boarding team reached the deck, they found no one. No blood, no personal belongings, no signs of damage. The main engines were off. The electrical system was drained, and notably, all the clocks on the ship were frozen at the same time, 3:16 a.m. No one knew if it was morning or afternoon. Digital clocks, mechanical clocks, clocks on the control panel, and a wristwatch in a drawer all showed 3:16. As if time on that ship had been stripped away, forced to halt, at a moment no one knew what had happened. Gabriella joined a special investigation team on a helicopter to the ship's anchorage point the next afternoon. The sky was overcast, thick with sea fog, sunlight distorted through patches of gray clouds. When she stepped onto the deck, the air felt heavier than normal, as if the space carried an invisible pressure, not from altitude, but from memory. No records existed for a ship coded B-723. Nothing in the databases for private vessels, cargo ships, or research crafts. But the hull structure, wooden deck planks, and engine room hatch design suggested it was an auxiliary vessel built to the Ocean Reveries schematics. As if a piece had been carved off the main ship, Gabriella walked down the corridor to the engine room, where the technical team had reported unstable electromagnetic waves and compasses spinning endlessly without a fixed point. As she entered the main engine cabin, her flashlight beam bounced off salt-encrusted metal walls. At the far end, among rusted steel blocks, was a large mirror, not mounted on a wall, not upright, but tilted at a 45-degree angle, facing a round window toward the sea. Gabriella approached cautiously. The mirror was spotless clear, as if someone had wiped it clean, or it had never been allowed to get dirty. She stood before it, looked in. At first, she saw only her reflection, her jacket, bare face, the flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. Then, a small movement. In the mirror, another figure appeared, standing behind her, though no one was behind her in reality. A man in a blue shirt, silver hair, unblinking eyes. Jonas Vale. Gabriella spun around. The room was still empty. She looked back at the mirror. Vale was still there, standing behind her, only in the reflection. This time, he raised a hand, and tapped 3 times lightly on the other side of the mirror. Knock, knock, knock. Gabriella stepped back, her heart pounding like a drum. All other sounds vanished. She no longer heard the waves, the footsteps in the corridor, the hum of recording equipment. Only her heartbeat and breath. Vale smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a threatening one, but a knowing smile, as if he had been standing there for ages, waiting for the moment she appeared, so he could do one thing: confirm that she had seen. That the mirror had opened. Gabriella wanted to grab her camera, to take a picture, but her hands froze, her body unresponsive. And in that moment, she realized, the mirror didn't reflect light, it reflected consciousness. Vale appeared because she had thought of him, because she had heard the sound, because she had believed something was on the other side. The knocks sounded again. 3 beats. Slower. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them. The mirror was empty. Just her, and herself. And as she turned to leave the engine room, hands trembling, her flashlight casting wavering shadows on the walls, Gabriella knew one thing. The ship coded B-723 wasn't just evidence, it was a fragment exiled from reality, like a slice of another world spat out through a crack, and if it had returned, what else was following? She stepped onto the deck. It began to rain. Heavy, cold droplets. And in the rain, the 3-beat echo sounded again, faint from the depths of the sea. Like someone knocking on this world from the other side of the mirror. Gabriella didn't clearly recall the moment she passed out. Only that, when she opened her eyes, the harsh, white light of a hospital flooded her vision, and the intermittent beeps of a heart monitor rang in her ears. A nurse stood beside her, her face blurry at first, gradually sharpening as Gabriella's still unsteady eyelids adjusted. "You're at San Pedro Federal Medical Center. You were brought in by helicopter. No serious injuries." Gabriella closed her eyes. Her mind was a thick fog. The inverted mirror in the engine room, Jonas Vale's 3 knocks, his expressionless smile, and the moment all sound dissolved, as if the world had been sucked into the center of his gaze. When she was lucid again, she asked about the B-723 ship. The nurse said it had been towed to a military dock, and immediately sealed off by the FBI and an undisclosed unit. No one was allowed near it. But one detail made Gabriella shudder. All her body cameras, including her earpiece recorder and backup device, were completely fried, memory wiped clean. No data, no battery logs, as if they had never been used. Only one item remained, a crumpled, folded piece of paper found in her jacket pocket, something she hadn't been carrying before. It was a hand-drawn sketch, scrawled in pencil, almost delirious, a tilted mirror frame, with a figure stepping through its edge, one leg already on the other side, the other still in this world. Beneath, in shaky handwriting, threshold, all caps. She clutched the paper tightly, letting no one touch it. 3 days later, Gabriella agreed to an internal interview with a special investigator from the Department of Homeland Security, sent after the B-723 incident. The interview took place in a sealed room, recorded by 3 independent devices, no video. She was asked to recount everything, from boarding the ship to being found unconscious. Gabriella answered briefly, but clearly. She spoke of the Knox, the inverted mirror, and Jonas Vale. When asked the final question, "Do you believe doctors Isaac and Lillian Bennett disappeared due to an unexplainable physical factor?" Gabriella paused for a long time. Then she replied, word by word, "I don't think we lost them. I think we gave them away without knowing." No one understood her immediately, but to her, it was all too clear. Cabin 723 was a threshold. Ocean Reverie was a conduit. Vale was the receiver. And what seemed like an experiment was merely the process of opening a door. Lillian wasn't taken. Isaac wasn't pulled away. They had crossed over, willingly or unknowingly, because of the call, the sound, the reflection that no longer aligned. Not everyone is chosen, but once consciousness splits, once a mirror becomes a door instead of a reflection, the one on the other side knows. Gabriella was placed on indefinite leave after the interview. The case was classified top secret. The B-723 ship vanished from all records. No press conference, no official conclusion. In the days that followed, she moved back to her old apartment in Santa Monica. No lights on at night, no mirrors. And whenever she passed a glass surface, she tilted her head, avoiding looking directly at her reflection for more than 3 seconds. Because she knew, a mirror only needed one lingering glance to start vibrating from within. Because she knew, Vale came from nowhere. He only reflected what humans feared most. Gabriella kept the mirror sketch in a safe, along with a copy of 723_awake.mp3 and a photo of Echo V 118. She wrote a handwritten note, sealed it in an envelope with the sketch. "If one day someone hears 3 knocks again, don't answer, don't look in the mirror, and if you see yourself standing in the wrong place, turn away. There's still time." That evening, as Gabriella prepared for bed, her bedside lamp flickered off. In the darkness, a faint sound came from the bathroom. Knock, 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 knock. She didn't move, didn't blink, just her heartbeat, steady, but slightly off rhythm. And in one perfect moment of silence, she heard the mirror hum softly, not from wind, not from vibration, but because someone was standing on the other side, still waiting, still smiling, still knocking 3 times, patiently. Because the door only needs one chosen person. Gabriella Huang didn't return to the FBI, didn't write a final report, didn't respond to any calls from federal agencies. She did what few dare to do after touching the unnameable. She quietly vanished from the system. 3 months after the B-723 incident, she moved to a small wooden house in the low hills outside Santa Cruz, not near the sea, not near the city, far from large mirrors, far from anything that could reflect her too clearly. The house had only 2 windows, one in the kitchen, one in the bedroom. She kept heavy curtains drawn all day, but at night, every night, when the sun set and the wind began to blow through the barren forest outside, Gabriella opened the curtains, placing a palm-sized mirror on the windowsill, facing the darkness. The mirror wasn't for looking, it was for watching. No one but her understood why. No one but her knew what she was waiting for. Time moved slowly in the Santa Cruz hills. No newspapers, no emails. Gabriella grew vegetables, read books, and every morning, wrote a brief handwritten journal entry. But all pages were burned by day's end. Nothing left behind. As if the past could only exist if repeated, and she wouldn't allow that. Occasionally, she still dreamed. Still saw the long dining table, no waiters, food always hot, and the empty chairs, always waiting for someone to return. The dream was no longer frightening, just too quiet to be healthy. One late autumn night, when the wind whipped through the trees, making a hissing sound like something refusing to sleep, Gabriella woke at 3:16 a.m. She hadn't set an alarm, but her body remembered the time, like a marker. She got out of bed, walked to the window where the small mirror sat, Outside, the sky was pitch black. No stars, no moon. Gabriella looked into the mirror. Her reflection was dim, and then another figure slowly appeared, beside her reflection. Not quite behind, not quite within. It was Lillian Bennett, expressionless, unblinking, standing there, in the mirror, as if she had never left. Gabriella held her breath. Lillian said nothing, just looked, and slowly raised a hand, touching the other side of the mirror, where glass should have been, but there was no sound of contact, as if she was on the inside. Gabriella didn't step back, didn't turn away, just stared deeply into the eyes of the woman she had investigated, tried to save, believed was a victim. Lillian's lips moved, but no sound came. And then, 3 knocks sounded in the room. Close, real, not from the mirror, not from the window. Knock, knock. Gabriella spun around. The room was empty, the wind stopped. No birds, no leaves, just the echo of her own consciousness, wondering if she was still the one standing outside the mirror, or had stepped inside long ago. She turned back to the mirror, one last time. Lillian was gone. Only Gabriella remained, fully reflected. But her left shoulder was slightly off, as if her jacket was worn by someone like her, but not quite matching. She closed her eyes, listened. The 3 knocks didn't repeat. They didn't need to. Before dawn, Gabriella opened her notebook, wrote one final line, bold and clear like an engraving. I used to think Vale was someone, but he's not a person. He's the mirror we see when we no longer trust reality. She closed the notebook, didn't burn it. Placed it on the table, then turned the mirror face down, like closing a door. But there was one thing she didn't know. The door wasn't in the mirror, it was in the person ready to believe the world had cracks. And when we see it, Vale only needs to step out. The story, Dr. Couple disappeared on a cruise in 2011. 8 years later, the Coast Guard found their medical bag is not merely a thrilling disappearance case, but a dark metaphor for the fragility of human consciousness in the face of the unexplainable, a theme still strikingly relevant in America today. In a society grappling with psychological crises, misinformation, and invisible fears, the details of Cabin 723, where there was no escape, where mirrors didn't reflect the truth, reveal something terrifying. Modern humans can be imprisoned, not by 4 walls, but by their own doubts about themselves and the reality around them. In a world besieged by fake news, perception-manipulating technology, and post-pandemic psychological trauma, Vale is no longer a supernatural figure. He is the manifestation of a shattered trust in one's own identity, the embodiment of what we see in the mirror when the mind can no longer hold steady. Lillian heard a call from the water. Isaac felt he was living in someone else's body, descriptions that echo symptoms of PTSD, depression, and social disconnection that many Americans are experiencing after major upheavals. What's the lesson here? That silence, isolation, and ignoring the signs of psychological cracks can lead us into a void where the mirror opens and reality dissolves. The only thing anchoring us to this world is the courage to face ourselves and to seek help when needed. Don't let Vale step in because you lingered too long in silence. If you've ever looked in a mirror and wondered if the reflection was truly you, don't forget to hit subscribe to explore more mysteries behind the surface of life. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where sometimes a knock is more than just a sound.